Good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's WorkSafe Tasmania Month webinar, Early Intervention and Effective Strategy for Office and Manual Tasks Workers to Reduce Injury Risk. I'm Stephanie from WorkSafe Tasmania and also the coordinator of WorkSafe Tasmania Month. I'll also be your moderator for this afternoon's webinar. Before we do get started though, I'd appreciate you taking a few moments to read the following slide about information delivered during WorkSafe Month sessions. I'd now like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in this afternoon's webinar. So we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. So you should see something that looks like this in the upper right corner of your computer screen. You're most likely listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. However, if you would like to or prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll also have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send your questions in, at any time during the presentation. We will collect these questions and address them at the end of today's presentation. We are also recording webinars during WorkSafe Month and will progressively make them available on the WorkSafe site after WorkSafe Month ends. Also and lastly, at the end of today's presentation, you will receive a short survey. So we do appreciate you taking a few moments to complete that survey, providing us with your feedback on the presentation and also on your webinar experience. So it is now my pleasure to hand you over to, or introduce, I should say, today's presenters. So we have from the Australian Physiotherapy Association Tasmanian branch, we have Lani Helbig and we also have Marie Weber. So welcome both to Lani and Marie. And your presentation today, Early Intervention and Effective Strategy for Office and Manual Tasks Workers to Reduce Injury Risk. Welcome both.
Thank you, Stephanie. Today's presentation is designed to give you some information about early intervention and also designing programs in conjunction with physiotherapists for best outcome. The learning outcomes from today are to identify common mechanisms of injury to office workers and the uses of mobile technology, to implement early intervention strategies to minimise the impact of injuries, and to recognise the role of a physiotherapist in managing musculoskeletal injuries in the workplace and at home from mobile technology. The key points from today's presentation are that risk of physical injury from overuse can be addressed by effective strategies in both the office and the manual environment, that evidence shows that recognising and addressing risk for discomfort leading to overuse is cost-effective, and of course the old adage that prevention is better than cure. What to expect in this webinar? You will have an explanation of injury types, understanding why overuse injury occurs, an understanding of what early intervention can look like, what a physiotherapist can do to help, and what you can do to help yourself. This will be an interactive webinar. We will ask you to risk assess your own posture and to get up and move, so be ready. What sort of injury are we talking about? Musculoskeletal disorder, or MSD as it is referred to, comes by many names. It can also be referred to as work-related musculoskeletal disorder or in the European terminology, work-related upper extremity disorder or work-related upper limb disorder. Is musculoskeletal disorder work-related? Some is, some is not. If it is caused or aggravated primarily by the work and the work environment, it is considered work-related. It can be caused by body stressing injuries, overuse injuries, or slips, trips and falls. Why is this a problem? Musculoskeletal injuries are the second largest group of injuries and conditions in the population. They are the second largest cost burden in the Australian health budget, and it is thought that up to 40% of the Australian population carries musculoskeletal discomfort at any one time. What is the cost? Workers' compensation statistics from the Australian Workers' Bureau 2012-13 indicated that injuries plus musculoskeletal disorder made up 90% of serious claims. Comcare compensation statistics identified body stressing injuries and diseases as 45% of claims and falls, slips and trips as 19% of claims. So what is the mechanism of the injury? Musculoskeletal disorder can occur through gradual wear and tear to soft tissues caused by repeated or continuous use of the same body parts, including static body positions. It can be caused by sudden damage caused by strenuous activity or unexpected movements, for example, slips and trips. Or it can be a combination of these mechanisms. If you ask a person experiencing musculoskeletal discomfort, what does it feel like? You may get a wide range of answers. Often people are unable to articulate what the discomfort actually feels like. They may describe fatigue, aching, burning, stinging, stabbing, pulling, tightness, tingling, numbness, pins and needles, and it may be cumulative or combinations of the above sensations, often in more than one body part. The person with the symptom may not be able to distinguish in the early stages between what is fatigue and what is discomfort. The early warning signs are there. Fatigue should ease as the muscles and soft tissues recover after activity. However, when demand exceeds capacity, this will lead to discomfort and risk of MSD. Static loading occurs when muscles work at low levels for periods without rest breaks. Very low levels of muscle activity have been associated with build-up of fatigue and discomfort. Low to the extent where the worker or person suffering the problem may not even be aware of any issue at all with their muscles. A classic example is muscles in the shoulder and the neck area working to support the arm while the fingers and the wrists do the work. People are not aware of the static load operating in this area to control the body part until it becomes uncomfortable. What is the impact on normal daily activities? Work-related or not, there will be an impact on everyday functional activities and quality of life. There can be loss of independence or ability to care for others, and a loss of productivity with presenteeism, where the person attends the workplace but is not fully engaged or productive due to their discomfort. It can also lead to sickness absence. How do we look at risk factors in terms of identifying hazardous manual tasks? The go-to document is the Code of Practice, Hazardous Manual Tasks 2011, the risk factors for manual tasks. This is found on the Australian Government Safe Work Australia website and is a fully complex document with great detail involving risk identification, risk assessment, risk control, and examples to work by. So risk factors for hazardous tasks include repetitive movement, sustained or awkward postures and vibration, repetitive or sustained forces, where repetitive is a movement or force performed more than twice a minute, and sustained a posture or force if held more than 30 seconds at a time. This document talks about awkward postures, and surprisingly, an awkward posture can be as little as 20 degrees from the neutral joint position. So observing these illustrations, which are taken directly from the Code of Practice, it does not necessarily appear at first that these are awkward postures, but indeed they are classified as so. Further awkward postures identified by the Code of Practice include reaching, stretching, pulling, hunching, grasping, and these are present in many everyday tasks. Awkward postures for hands and forearms include a stretched grasp, lifting with a wide or a fine grasp, and keying with the hands lifted. Risk factors for neck and shoulders can include working in positions where parts of the body have to be supported or objects held, for example, working with elevated arms, or working in prolonged static postures involving the continuous contraction of the same muscle group, such as working with a microscope, where a fixed posture is held but repetitive fine movements are made with the fingers, or repeated lifting of the arms, such as in process or stacking tasks. What does the evidence tell us about risk for manual tasks? It talks about risks for neck complaints, back complaints, and shoulder complaints in the Code of Practice, and it has common features for neck, shoulder, and back. Common physical features can be lifting 6 to 15 kilograms more than 10 times an hour, or lifting more than 16 kilograms at all, always or often working with the back in an awkward position, and working with the head and neck bent or excessively twisted excessively. Psychosocial factors include intrinsic and extrinsic effort. There are specific risk factors for neck complaints added to what we have discussed already. These can be vibration, that made the hands vibrate in the past week using a power tool, sitting and using a computer for half of the work time, or seated for 30 minutes or more without a break. Additional psychosocial risk factors for neck complaints can be job future ambiguity, verbal abuse with or without confrontations with clients or the public. Additional to the common issues mentioned already for shoulder complaints are repetitive wrist movements for much of the normal working day, or repetitive arm movements, and seated for 30 minutes or more without a break whilst carrying out work, while the psychosocial factors are low social support, low reward, job future ambiguity, and threat of harm or injury. The additional features for low back complaints for risk are pulling and pushing in combination with lifting, and role conflict or threat of physical harm or injury. So to summarise, for office workers, what constitutes a risk for musculoskeletal disorder? Awkward upper body postures, neck, shoulders, wrists, upper back and lower back, prolonged or static postures, sitting for more than 20 to 40 minutes without a break, and the evidence over time is for less and less periods of time sitting without causing problems, and repetitive movements. Now, it's over to you.
Okay, well, this is Lani speaking now. It's time for us to have a little scan of our bodies. We're physiotherapists, we like to get you moving. Marie's talked about how important it is not to sit, and we've been sitting for at least 15 minutes, I reckon, without moving. So let's scan down our bodies. Let's check in with your body. Where is your neck? Have a feel of where your chin is. Is it poking out? Are you peering in to the screen to look? You might want to choose to use this time now to move to a better posture, or at least to get your head moving on your neck. What about your shoulders? Are they forward? Are they hunched? Your middle back, is it rounded? Where's that part of your back? Or in your lower back? What position is your spine in the chair? Are you sitting back against the backrest? Or are you hunched forward? Are you leaning on your arms? Where are your legs? Where is your weight distributed? More on one side than the other? That has influence on how your spine will be shaped as well. So just check in, give yourself a move if you need to. You may wish to stand up now and just have a tiny walk on the spot, and then sit back down and get comfortable, and Marie will continue with some more of the webinar.
Thank you, Lani. So now to recap, identifying musculoskeletal risk for manual workers and for office workers. Awkward postures, reaching, stretching, pulling, grasping, hunching, lifting. Static postures, holding positions or objects. The length of time in which this is done. Lifting objects and whether there is vibration involved. And repetitive movement. And psychosocial factors. So where do we go once we've identified some risk for activities? Consider early intervention, an integrated approach by all stakeholders, the employer, the supervisor, the worker, and the health professional. Early intervention identifies and responds to warning signs and reports of accidents and incidents in the workplace. An early response often prevents a worker from becoming ill or taking long-term sick leave or submitting a workers' compensation claim. The benefits of early intervention are many and often hidden. They include improved injury outcomes for the worker, reducing indirect costs to employers. Some American literature reports on a 17-to-1 return on investment for an effective early intervention to prevent the development of a more serious condition. It helps prevent long-term absence, increases the probability of returning to work. It reduces adverse effects on co-workers potentially being increased by a workload because of the colleague being injured. And it creates a productive and supportive workplace with obvious management commitment. Comcare website outlines these benefits very clearly in its documents. To have a good early intervention, there needs to be a process in place. And again, I refer to the Comcare website, which details the steps very clearly. There needs to be clear policies or guidelines in place to support employees. Management need to be aware of early warning signs and able to respond appropriately. Need to make early contact with the employee to offer help. You need to get early and expert assessment to identify the employee's needs and use a consultative approach to continuing at or returning to work, and to provide flexible workplace solutions to support the employee at work. These references are taken from the Comcare website. So early intervention for musculoskeletal discomfort. Encourage early reporting of discomfort or near misses. Some workplaces are reluctant to survey employees for fear of what may be found in terms of discomfort, but it is much more cost-effective to address this discomfort early rather than ignore it or not be aware of it until a full injury occurs. The actions involved would be a risk assessment, ergonomic assessment, and considering treatment options. Identifying symptoms can be as simple as a survey, and once again, the Code of Practice on the Safe Work Australia government website has a discomfort survey that could be useful in such a situation. If you're looking for ergonomic assessment, the components to be looked at are looking at physical and cognitive factors, the postures, the movements, the actions, the effort, the design of work, the characteristics of the task, and the work type and the work organisation. the characteristics of the environment, and psychosocial factors. The principles to be used in ergonomic evaluation in early intervention would be firstly and always to comply with the legislative requirements of the jurisdiction, comply with the relevant codes of practice, and the 2011 Code of Practice for Hazardous Manual Tasks would be the relevant code of practice in this scenario, comply with relevant Australian standards, which may be for office desks, office workstations, office chairs, lighting, heat and environment. Use the risk control hierarchy to make sure that recommendations fit with the hierarchy of elimination and modification as preferred engineering controls. Identify and use evidence-based solutions. Use participatory ergonomics so that all stakeholders are engaged, consulted and recommendations made with their knowledge. Using clinical reasoning where there may be more than one option to be able to choose the most effective outcome for the situation. And most importantly, to review and evaluate. It is widely recognised that taking a biopsychosocial approach is the most effective way of providing an intervention. This is an individual-centred model that considers the person, the health problem and their context, biological, the physical or mental health, psychological, recognising that psychological factors influence functioning, and social, recognising that social context places constraints on functioning. This information is taken from the Heads of Workers' Compensation Authority document. The Heads of Workers' Compensation Authority recommends the biopsychosocial approach, and this approach forms the basis of the World Health Organization classification for function, disability and health, and this is accepted as the framework for disability and rehabilitation. The biopsychosocial approach is fundamental to better clinical and occupational rehabilitation management. Again, taken from the Heads of Workers' Compensation Authority website. So why might you consider early treatment for somebody with a musculoskeletal disorder? The benefits of early treatment are that early activity improves pain and stiffness. Early treatment can speed return to work. Early treatment does not increase complications or lead to residual symptoms. Early treatment may lead to less treatment consumption overall. And in general, resting injured upper limbs delays recovery, and ignoring symptoms may result in them worsening. So, to recap, for musculoskeletal order, what to do? Encourage early reporting of discomfort, injury or near miss. Provide a risk assessment. Consider an ergonomic assessment. Consider, is treatment needed? Is the injury or condition work-related or not? Consider the potential negative impact on the worker and the workplace. Many enlightened workplaces will seek advice for a non-related musculoskeletal disorder, being aware that this may well impact the worker's ability to perform their tasks and may lead to further problems. Now over to Lani again. Time to avoid those static postures and get up and move.
Okay, so yes, definitely. If you didn't stand up last time, now's the time to take a stand up. Have a little stretch, move your legs. We want to get those big muscles in your lower limbs working, your quad muscles in the front of your thigh and your bottom muscles. You want them to have a little move the blood around in your body. There's research that shows this is really good for lots of metabolic issues as well, so get those muscles moving. You might want to just move your arms, change your posture, roll your shoulders, get some blood moving in your arms as well. Just have a bit of a move. Up on your toes and down, whatever is comfortable for you. Have a little walk on the spot. So this is the kind of thing that you could use in your work days, just a tiny little break to get your muscles moving. When you're finished, take a seat, maybe in a slightly different position from where you were before, and Marie will continue.
Thanks, Lani. You may notice that we don't have lists of prescriptive exercises as part of our webinar, and that is because each individual carries a different musculoskeletal footprint, so that if you're trying to follow prescribed exercises for the whole population, you need to take into account the individual variability. For example, if you're an older worker with arthritis in your shoulder, the exercises that you might do might be very different to an 18-year-old. But you should still be exercising. If in doubt, follow the next step. Consider calling a physiotherapist. A physiotherapist is able to prescribe suitable exercise based on a sound knowledge of the musculoskeletal context of the person. Interestingly, the Tasmanian WorkCover website states that physiotherapists understand and comply with the clinical framework for delivery of health services within workers' compensation and are qualified to provide workplace assessment. Early intervention can involve the role of physiotherapy. Physiotherapy strategies to assist with early return to work and early intervention can include clinic and/or workplace-based interventions, discussing the tasks with the patient, helping to problem-solve ways of achieving function to make early return to work or staying at work more achievable, focusing on ability rather than disability, and avoiding negative messages, focusing on positivity, and always promoting self-management strategies. Physiotherapists understand the biomechanics of the body, the pathology of injury, and the effect on body and function. They recognise what is normal movement and what is not, and the impact of one injured body part on the remainder of the musculoskeletal function of the body. Physios can provide recommendations in the clinic or in the workplace, and this is functional advice and treatment to restore movement to normal and thus minimise risk for further injury. In the clinic, the physio will measure and demonstrate the effectiveness of treatment. They will empower the injured person to manage their injury. They will assist workers to be able to self-manage any further musculoskeletal issues. They will use a biopsychosocial approach and implement goals focusing on optimising function, participation and return to work or being maintained at work, and base treatment on the best available research evidence. In the workplace, physiotherapists will use ergonomic principles. They will advise to achieve neutral postures and normalise movement. They will empower the injured person to self-manage their injury, educate regarding minimising further risk of musculoskeletal disorder, and implement goals focusing on optimising function, participation, and return or maintenance at work. And of course, adopting a biopsychosocial approach involving all stakeholders. We have a couple of examples. First case study is Judith, the executive assistant, and the mouse. Many of us are Judiths, working hard at our computers, being diligent, trying to get the work done. Judith has mouse-intense work. She's had a change of computer program which has resulted in more mousing as she can no longer tab through her programs. She has simultaneous requests from her various managers for urgent work to be completed. Her work is deadline sensitive. She skips breaks to try to achieve the outcomes as required. Through the day she fatigues and slumps forward. Her mouse slides out to the side. Her wrist aches, so she leans further forward to protect her arm. And over time, this in turn leads to elbow, shoulder, shoulder blade, neck and back discomfort. What can be done to assist Judith? Here is a sample picture only from the internet because it highlights the various points at which discomfort may be experienced and which has been described for Judith previously. Some of the risks identified in this illustration are the awkward and static postures of the shoulder rounded and forward, the elbow straight, the wrists lifted, the hand in a claw position over the mouse, the right side of the body rotated compared to the left, and the head slightly forward compared to the neck. Added to these, the psychosocial demands of having low control but high demand in the workplace builds a recipe for discomfort and then pain. What can be done to assist Judith? Some strategies will include being able to address the awkward postures. But first of all, in terms of the bigger ergonomic picture, what should happen is that Judith should speak with her supervisor and manager in order to assess the workload. Is it reasonable, or is it something that she needs to be able to modify over time? In addition to being able to modify her workload if this is needed, Judith will also need to have her work design reviewed, and she will need to be able to be educated about ongoing self-management of her discomfort, so that if her workload can be modified so that all her deadlines do not occur simultaneously, and if she can achieve neutral postures with relaxed supported sitting, neutral neck, shoulder and mouse close, if she can achieve microbreaks to break up the static posture and achieve normal movement frequently through her workday, and if she can get up and move often, she may find that her symptoms resolve to a large extent. There are many strategies for implementing these in ergonomic terms. You will all be aware of many different sorts of keyboards and mouses that are out there to be able to make a better working posture overall. However, if after implementing all these strategies, Judith continues to experience discomfort, she may need to have treatment. Physiotherapy treatment can address the awkward posture of the shoulder, and if there is a muscle imbalance between the posterior shoulder muscles being stretched and the anterior or front shoulder muscles being contracted, for example, which often occurs, the physiotherapist will be able to identify this and teach Judith some strategies for managing this and preventing for the long term. So recapping, musculoskeletal discomfort and early intervention in the office. We need to avoid sedentary work risk and sedentary lifestyle risk. We need to stand up, to sit less and to move more, knowing that exercise is not protective against the negative effects of prolonged sitting, and prolonged sitting is associated with risk of metabolic disorders and chronic disease, as well as musculoskeletal order. So recapping, early intervention in the office. Avoid awkward postures. Avoid peering to the screen, hunching the back, perching on the chair, lifting shoulders and wrists. Avoid prolonged postures. Take regular micro breaks, 30 to 60 seconds every 10 to 20 minutes to move in a comfortable way, and get up and move after every 20 to 40 minutes. And report any discomfort or ongoing discomfort early. I'm sure when we turn on our computers in the mornings, we all sit in a perfect ergonomic sense, beautifully positioned, ready for the day's work. But how many of us within 10 or 15 minutes have turned into one of the postures that you can see on your screen now? Taking pause breaks is really important. Sorry, apologies. Tips to encouraging compliance for pause breaks are to organise tasks for postural variance, to use rest break reminder software, to print or file in small batches, knowing that email does not constitute a pause break, keeping it simple, moving the static joints, resting the moving joints, moving in the opposite direction to that in which the work directs you, moving every 20 to 40 minutes, and addressing workplace culture. It is okay to take a micro break, get up and move. And micro breaks do not improve productivity, do not affect productivity. And talking of micro breaks, over to Lani again. Okay, it's time for you to get up and move again. Let's try some little micro pause exercises. Tiny shoulder rolls, picking your shoulders up, rolling in small circles and dropping down. Try one shoulder and then the other shoulder and both together. Shoulder blade squeezes, stretching your shoulder blades together so that you can feel the front of your chest opening and the area between the shoulder blades tightening. Shoulder shrugs, bringing the shoulders up to the ears, gently holding and letting go. Fidget and wriggle. Try doing the opposite movement to what your work requires, remembering that micropause breaks do not affect overall productivity. You can stay standing if you wish as we continue the presentation. Early intervention for manual tasks. Similar to office-based work, first always risk assess, using the risk control hierarchy to make sure that you identify engineering or other factors to eliminate or modify risk. Suss out the task. Assess the task to identify the risk factors. Rotate tasks to avoid any prolonged activity on any one task. Consider the match between the worker capacity and the demands of the task. And consider warm-ups prior to starting physical work. Make adjustments for older workers. Our second case study is for Mike, the Parcel Courier. Mike starts work at 4 a.m. Can be cold in Hobart in winter. He sorts his parcels to and from a racking system in order to determine delivery sequence. He loads the parcels into the van. So by the time he loads his parcels, he has already handled them 3 times. He has repetitive lifting and handling into and out of the van in a confined space. He has parcels of unknown weight and awkward size. He has an uncontrolled environment for delivery, West Hobart, with up to 30 to 40 steps for some households, to regional Hobart with long walkways and driveways. He has paced work with a KPI requirement of delivery by 11:30 a.m. And he has piecework, so more parcels delivered equals more dollars earned. This illustration is taken as an example only from the internet. So some of the risks that Mike might encounter as part of his work are jumping out of a warm bed into a warm car and then starting hard physical work early in the morning without having a chance to have warmed up. Literature tells us that the body is more susceptible to injury in the lower back after long periods of sitting or lying with sudden activity occurring. His repetitive lifting in and out of the van and the parcel racking system may place strain on his hands, wrists, elbows, neck, shoulders, upper and lower back. He may be at trip, slip and fall risk if he is carrying heavy objects and is not able to see clearly. And he has the psychosocial pressures of needing to get the work done by deadlines. So what are some of the strategies or interventions that might help Mike? Talking about the design of his work with his supervisor or employer. Perhaps the workload has increased significantly and perhaps the employer is not fully aware. Reviewing the design and the flow of work. Is he double or triple handling? Could we eliminate or modify some of the lifting? Could he use load shifting equipment or a better design and layout of the parcel racking system? Can he be educated in self-management for dynamic risk assessment? As he moves through his day, every delivery point is potentially different, so he will need to be very clear about identifying risk at each area. Can we use targeted specific manual handling task training after using the risk hierarchy to address tasks? Manual handling training in a generic form has been shown not to be efficient. However, once ergonomic interventions of elimination and modification have been undergone, targeted task-specific training with practice and consultation can be helpful. Should Mike be doing some pre-shift warm-ups to prepare his lower back for the sudden onset of activity? And could he do some microbreaks during the shift to achieve normal movement and keep the rest of his body active from the continuous forward lifting and movement activity of his work? If he developed discomfort despite all these interventions, perhaps he would consider being referred to a physiotherapist for assessment of his muscle strength and condition and some advice to keep him strong and fit for his job. And now the future is here. We have rapid technological change impacting all areas of work. The technology is used by increasing numbers of workers. It may require handheld devices additional to usual tasks, and it may allow or require working out of standard hours. This future technology is bringing with it a whole raft of new risks. We estimate 300 million tablets in use in 2015. We know that mobile gadgets introduce new ergonomic problems. And we know that the ergonomic advice for these gadgets needs to be given, but there is lack of sufficient research. Rapid evolution with constant changes means that there is no one right answer. Physiotherapists are able to use their basic principles and knowledge of anatomy, biomechanics, and injury management and normal movement to be able to use clinical reasoning and first principles to give sound advice. We have a whole new terminology: iPad neck, text to thumb, smartphone zombies, head down tribe, and all sorts of potential musculoskeletal risk emerging, from head down with neck flexion to situational awareness issues. We're aware that when texting, most of the population has the head in a forward position, placing hugely increased loading into the small structures of the neck. And with tablet use, we know from Basavada that when texting and using tablets with the neck in a flexed position compared to neutral, there's a 3 to 5 increased strain on the neck muscles. Have a look at the picture on the right. Is this you relaxing at home in the evening? So early intervention for laptop use and outside the office. Where is the laptop being used? How and how much? Are you sitting on the couch at home with the laptop? Are you sitting in a hunched or banana back position, looking down to the laptop or tablet on your knee? Placing a small pillow behind your back or a pillow on your knee under the tablet or laptop will make a much a great benefit for neutral back posture and less looking down. At home, consider using the laptop on the kitchen bench, or perhaps on a chopping board on the bench if you're tall. For standing. At work, try linking the laptop to the PC or use a rider with a separate keyboard and mouse. With screen heights, avoid looking up. Use a downward gaze, but if looking directly down and tilting the head forward, use a small riser. Avoid raising the shoulders for the keyboard. Hands should be level with the forearms at or slightly lower than the elbows. When using laptops and tablets, take regular micro breaks every 15 minutes and get up and move often. So when using a phone, avoid looking down directly, avoid holding the phone and texting with one hand, and keep situational awareness to avoid slips, trips and falls. So take-home messages for best practice for early intervention. Early intervention does work. Identify and addresses musculoskeletal discomfort early. It follows evidence-based guidelines. It uses risk assessment, the risk control hierarchy to manage risk, and a biopsychosocial model overall. Physiotherapy can be a part of an effective early work intervention strategy in the clinic and or in the workplace. You can find a physiotherapist from the APA website. Thank you for listening. Please get up and move again whilst we answer questions, as without movement, this is where we are all heading in office-based work.
It helps if I take myself off mute. So thank you very much, Lani and Marie, for this afternoon's presentation, Early Intervention and Effective Strategy for Office and Manual Tasks Workers to Reduce Injury Risk. So there is time now if anyone would like to submit any questions to either Marie and Lani. So please do submit those questions in the questions pane in the control panel on the right-hand side. So one question that has come through, Lani and Marie, is it possible to get a copy of the presentation so that we have access to the appropriate links?
Thank you, Stephanie. It's Marie. I'll answer the question. I understand that this presentation is going to be loaded onto the WorkSafe Tasmania website over time and will be available. So perhaps I'll just flick back to Stephanie to address that. The question being, is it going to be available so that the people can get the links to the references on the presentation, Stephanie?
Yes, as mentioned at the start, the webinar has been recorded and the presentation will be made available following WorkSafe month, but I could additionally send out the links if you were both happy for me to do that. I can do that. I'll send out not the whole presentation, but I can send out certainly the links that or the references that were mentioned in Lani and Marie's presentation. So again, if there are any further questions, please do submit them. While we are sort of wrapping up the presentation this afternoon, I will remind people that Friday is the last day of WorkSafe Tasmania month. We are ending the month this year with a run around the Hobart Rivulet. So do have a look in the WorkSafe Tasmania month program for that event, plus any other webinars that we are running right up until Thursday. An an additional question that has come through. Lani and Marie, what are your thoughts on sit-stand workstations?
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. It's Marie. I'll answer this question. Sit-stand workstations are definitely the flavour of the month. People providing ergonomic interventions and assessments get asked for these all the time. And certainly from a physiotherapy point of view, a sit-stand workstation to facilitate standing and moving through the day is desirable. However, a sit-stand workstation is not necessarily the sole answer to any particular issue, because it requires commitment and behaviour change from the person to use the sit-stand station. A sensible approach for a physiotherapist would be instructing or discussing with the worker about opportunities for standing through the day. We call this opportunistic standing, and very often 5 minutes an hour or more can be found through simple things like taking micro-pause breaks, standing for a few seconds every 10 to 15 minutes. For example, standing when talking on the phone, standing when talking to colleagues, standing when reading hard copy, standing in meetings. In fact, we encourage people to be standing champions in their workplace with or without sit-stand stations. My advice about a sit-stand station would be that if there is no real opportunity for the person to introduce their own regular short standing breaks through the day, because perhaps their work is 100% screen-based with no other tasks, then this may be something that could be considered. But I would just like to stress that just providing a sit-stand station on its own is not necessarily going to result in good behaviour change. If the person has a musculoskeletal condition such as a serious low back or hip problem, sometimes standing is recommended over sitting, but this would be a specific instance requiring a full assessment and conversation with the treatment providers. So over time, I'm sure that we will see more and more standing stations coming into workplaces as the price comes down and the availability increases, and of many different models, from retrofitted desktop stations to the electric adjustment stations. But at present, my advice would be to workers to look for every opportunity to make changes themselves, and then consider a sit-stand station if they have not been able to introduce any changes through their current tasks.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Marie. And with, I guess, no further questions that have come through, again, I thank Marie and sorry, I thank both Marie and Lani from the Australian Physiotherapy Association Tasmanian branch for this afternoon's webinar, Early Intervention and Effective Strategy for Office and Manual Tasks Workers to Reduce Injury and Risk. I do also remind people that once you do leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, so we would appreciate you completing that and providing us with your feedback. And on behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and our presenters today, we thank you as well for joining us and hope that you have a good rest of the day and that it is a safe and a healthy one. Thank you, and thank you, Lani and Marie.